The US President speaking there. Well, for more, we're joined now from Newport, Rhode Island, in the United States, by Tom Nichols, who is the author of The Death of Expertise. And you also taught international relations and Russian affairs for many years. Thank you so much for speaking to us. What do you think President Trump is seeking to gain by attending a forum like Davos?
Well, it is a strange environment for the president who ran against globalization and the global economy. On the other hand, the president is a businessman, and he, I think, understands, and at least the people around him seem to understand the importance of being involved in the global economy. So I think in that sense, he's there simply to reassure some of the other economic powers that wonder if America is still in the game. I don't know how successful he's being at that, but so far, I think that's the goal.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you. I mean, of course, you're not in Davos. You're a long way away, and this audience was not an average audience, was it? I mean, it's 1,500 people in that room, very much the top brass of major global organizations. From what you've read and from what you're hearing, do you get the impression they were impressed by the US president?
I'm going to, from a distance, I'm going to guess that they probably were not. And of course, this is only my own view. Because the president's campaign was so brutally aimed at the international global environment. And this is part of the problem. When an American president runs as a populist, that's difficult to do because America is a globally engaged economic, military, diplomatic superpower. And so it's very difficult to say things in Wisconsin or Ohio and then have to actually go and deal with the international economy and the people who actually make the international economy function. So I can't imagine that much of what the president's saying is having an effect one way or another. I think what most of those world leaders are going to look for is what American markets and American policies actually do over the next few months rather than any one thing that President Trump's going to say.
And do you think he judged the tone of the forum correctly by only talking about business issues? I mean, he didn't talk about climate change, for example, which is one of the other major concerns at the forefront of the minds of people who attend forums like Davos. Do you think that was a misjudgment on his part?
No, on this, and I've been pretty well known as a critic of the president on most things, but I don't think anybody could realistically expect Donald Trump to go to Davos and start talking about climate change. I mean, it's not what he ran on. It does not have the same resonance, particularly among his voters here in the United States, that it does with people in other places. I think the president probably misjudged the tone of the room when he decided to go off on his own personal grievances, which is something he has a tendency to do in any kind of a press environment or any kind of a public environment. And that probably came off as a little strange. But, if you went to Davos expecting Donald Trump to talk about climate change, then you've never heard Donald Trump speak before.
Indeed. And of course, the press making their presence felt, even as Trump was there, a long way away from the United States, haunting him, if you will, with these latest reports in the New York Times. And of course, he must have been feeling pretty aggrieved as he went into that forum, taking aim at what he called the fake news press, because, again, he calls this another example of fake news reporting by the New York Times.
Yeah, he has a very strange relationship with the Times because one of his he's certainly given a lot of access to some reporters from the Times, but I think, being a New Yorker, for him, the Times is the newspaper of record. But I think on a deeper level, grievance is part of what this administration is about. I mean, it's partly what helped them get elected, that the edge in the Electoral College was provided by people in states who feel genuinely aggrieved by the fact that they feel, particularly when it comes to Davos, that globalization and global elites somehow kind of left them behind as the world became wealthier and more developed, that people in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin got left behind. So in that sense, it may not play very well in Davos, but it's probably going to play pretty well in Pennsylvania.
All in all, I just saw one of the president's tweets as he left Davos. He's now in the air. He seemed to think everything went very well, and things could have gone very differently. I mean, there were a couple of boos, there were a couple of hisses, there were some Greenpeace protesters on the sidelines, but a long way away from where the event was actually held. But all in all, it went quite well, didn't it?
I think, there's a couple of things. First of all, the president's evaluation is always, you always have to take that with a grain of salt, because everything the president does is the best and it's the greatest and it's wonderful and everything went fine. And, even when there have been meetings like the disastrous NATO meeting and some of the other things he's gone through, he says, oh, it went terrific. So it's hard to judge from President Trump's reaction. With that said, I think it did go reasonably well, in part because we've lowered our expectations to the point where any international meeting that is not a disaster is a success, especially when the president gets in front of the press and he starts to go, to wing it and go extemporaneously. There's always a real danger there that he's going to say something that his staff is going to have to deal with. So in that sense, yes, I think he delivered a message of reassurance. I think his very presence there was at least in some sense a reassurance that no, the United States is not really walking away from the economy. This is something I said during the campaign, but here I am in Davos. I'm not sure how much was accomplished other than not making any major errors. So if that's the line, then, or the bar, then he cleared it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there. Author Tom Nichols in Rhode Island, thank you very much indeed for speaking to France 24.